Hi, everyone. Welcome. You are in the Navigating the Admissions Process presentations right now. To start with, I want to introduce myself. My name is Elga Gruner. I work with the Vermont State University admissions team. I'm based at the Williston campus, and totally not doing this with the. I think we'll just do this maybe. Okay. And then.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Dechert. I work at Dartmouth College, and I work with our students in the state of Vermont and some international territories.
All right. So we're going to kind of, to start with this is kind of the overview of the presentation today. To start with, we will kind of just go over who is kind of your admissions advocates, your admissions team, your admissions people. Has any of you have started your college search at all? Visited some campuses? Yeah, great, awesome. So basically, this is kind of, for some maybe it's not new, but for some people might be a new thing. School counselors is a good resource for students to kind of help you navigate what colleges have the programs that you may be interested in, and also preparing you with the type of classes that you may need to take to get you ready for the colleges and the programs that you may be interested in pursuing. Family and friends, your parents, your siblings, older siblings, or maybe cousins and uncles, they may have some experience that can help you with the whole college process, perhaps in just bringing you to college visits and doing a lot of maybe sharing their personal experiences in their college process themselves. So other resources like VSAC, I'm sure when you first come in, you probably saw a whole bunch of sheets of papers that are kind of on that table. So that's kind of, a lot of the resources that VSACs are offering students, in addition to grants, scholarships, and also tips on how to be successful when looking for colleges that fit for you. So the admissions, it's kind of like myself and Anna. So we work with students, like for example, with Vermont State University, because I'm just going to pick on Vermont State University because I work for Vermont State University. For us, certain programs have no prerequisites, but certain programs have prerequisites for admissions. So the admissions team can help you with preparing yourself, with knowing what are those criteria might be, and when the deadlines are, and the kind of things that you need to have ahead of time, what kind of classes you should take at high school, and also kind of preparing yourself so that you can, maybe transfer classes if you maybe go into CCV first and get college credits. So what kind of college credits you might be able to take. We will work with students in that whole process with you ahead of time, and also during the admissions process while you have submitted your application. Like what type of items you need for your applications and all of that stuff. So that's kind of where the admission teams work with students. So this is kind of going back with the whole admissions process. When you submit an application, you've submitted all of the stuff. There are different type of decisions that admissions offer. So for some schools, they offer early decisions. So these early decision deadlines are typically in November or December, and it's binding. Early action is similar to early decision, except early action is typically not a binding type of admissions. You just get the decision early, but it's not, you don't have to, when you're admitted, it's not, you don't have to make a decision to go there. It's good for you to know, but you still have that time to process and take a look at your financial aid. You don't really have to make a decision right away. So the regular decision for some competitive schools, like Ivy League schools, for example, they do have early decisions and early actions deadlines. In addition to that, they also have what they call regular decision deadline, and that's typically a later date. I know Dartmouth, would you like to talk a little bit about your decision process?
Yeah, so we offer early decision. If you have done all your research and maybe that's been over the course of months or maybe even years, and you've decided that Dartmouth is your top choice, you've thought about all the different things, and that is where you want to be, we have a binding early decision option. You submit your application by November 1st. You get a response back from us around December 15th. If you are admitted, you withdraw any other applications to other universities and you confirm that you're coming to Dartmouth. If you are looking at some different places and you think, I'm really interested in Dartmouth, I'm not certain that that's going to be my top choice, I want to apply to several different universities, see where I get in, maybe also compare financial aid packages, sit down with my family, make that final decision after I see all those options, then you're going to apply regular decision. Typically around January 1st is the deadline for that. It takes us quite a bit of time to get through all those applications, and then around April 1st is when schools like Dartmouth will send out those regular decision offers, and then it's up to you whether you say yes or no to a school that you've been admitted to regular decision.
Thank you. Rolling admissions, basically, students can apply anytime, and the admissions counselors and admissions team release the decision as soon as we have everything that we need to release those decisions to students. So with Vermont State University, we have early action for some of our programs. I work with students that are interested in radiologic science, professional pilot technology, and dental hygiene. And those programs have early action or early admission deadline. And for the rest of our program at Vermont State, typically are rolling admissions. So that's the difference between the different types of admissions. So every school has different, yeah.
So it can depend a little bit on the school, and that might be something to ask at different schools. By applying early decision in particular, you're saying this is my top choice, and it helps us to kind of fill the class with students who really want to be at Dartmouth and who we know are going to say yes. I would say that for Dartmouth, it does not particularly increase your odds of getting in applying early decision versus regular decision. So the benefit is really more on the student side that December 15th, you've got your answer. You don't need to continue through that process in the spring. There are universities that will sometimes be very explicit in, we want students who want to be here, and we actually admit at a higher rate from our early decision or early action pools. Always be careful about what data you find online, but there are places where you can kind of say what's the admit rate for early decision or early action versus the admit rate for regular decision. And there might be a school that a student, if they're applying early, they have a higher chance or even maybe a much higher chance of getting in as opposed to being in the regular decision pool.
Yeah, and also some schools offer scholarships that kind of connected with the early decision deadline or early action deadline. So if you don't have your applications completed by those deadlines, you might not qualify for those scholarships. So that's kind of, I hope that answers some of your questions. So this is kind of like a comprehensive list of what a university or a college typically want for their application. So depending on the school, some schools might be test optional. Some schools may not be test optional. Some schools might require a letter of recommendations. Even within the same school, they might have some programs that require a letter of recommendations and some are not. So just kind of, this is kind of like a typical list of what schools are looking for to complete a student's application. So are there any questions on this? Do you have any?
So For schools that use the common application, when you go into that, it's a web platform that has a whole bunch of different universities that are on that same one. You add schools to your page, and it will show exactly what the requirements are for those individual schools. So sometimes on those platforms, you do the work of adding the schools, and then you've got your sort of checklist in front of you. But this might be something, if you're looking at different schools that have their own school-specific application, this might be a spreadsheet that you're setting up. I would imagine that VSAC and some other organizations have templates for this kind of stuff so that you're keeping track of what's the application platform, what's required, do I need recommendation letters or not, do I need testing or not, what's the deadline, and unfortunately there's not a kind of one size fits all for this, so you do need to do a little research and keep track of those things. Yes. So there's a question about who would qualify for fee waivers. So that's, again, school specific sometimes, but I know that at Dartmouth, you can say that you need a fee waiver and have that verified by your high school counselor, that paying the application fee, which I think is $80 or $90, would be a hardship for you, and we would generally waive that. Other universities might have kind of specific criteria of who that would be waived for, who it would not be waived for. There are also some universities that do not charge an application fee, and that might be something that you're keeping track of as well. But always fine to ask, I really want to apply to this university, that application fee is going to be a hardship for us. Is there any possibility for a fee waiver?
Depending on the school, some schools are test blind, meaning like they don't even look at it if you submit it. Some schools, if you submit it, they might look at it. It might help or it might not help your admissions. No, it does not.
I would really carefully look at the language that a university uses. So using Dartmouth as an example, during COVID, we paused our testing. We had required the SAT or ACT for all applicants up until COVID. There were huge disruptions to accessibility to tests being canceled. Students could not take the test in a lot of situations. So we paused the testing requirement, and we were truly test optional. You could submit it or you could not. We paused reporting on testing, because when you become test optional, the students who submit testing are more likely to have much higher scores, and then colleges are reporting scores that were getting higher and higher and higher and looking more and more impressive. We stopped reporting during that time because those scores were not representative of the class coming into Dartmouth. 2 years ago, we shifted our language and we said, testing is recommended. If you have the SAT or ACT available to you, we recommend that you submit that with your application. And it was optional, but it was recommended and we wanted to see it. We are now back to requiring the SAT or ACT for all applicants. One thing that I will say on that is that we have stopped reporting testing in the same way, because a lot of students misunderstand how individual institutions might be using testing. So for Dartmouth, we very much look at testing within the context of a student's school and geography that they're coming from. And that's information that we can get from College Board. If you look at our kind of average testing, getting a 700 on the SAT on the 2 sections, that is technically below average for us. If you are a student who is in a context where the average testing in your high school is a 1050 combined, and you're applying to us with a 1400, that you're a standout student. That's huge. We're not seeing that as, oh, they're below average. We're seeing that as you are really far above average in your context. So I would just really hone in on the language that each individual institution uses around test optional, if they have that. Oh, great. All right. One more question before we move on. Yeah. How many recommendation letters? I would say submit the number that are requested. Do not submit a whole lot more than that. So at Dartmouth, we request 1 recommendation letter from the counselor that's submitted with the school report and 2 teacher recommendation letters. If you feel really strongly that there's a third person that you want to have a recommendation letter from, then maybe that's something that you're including, but we have a lot of applications to get through. I don't want 15 recommendation letters clogging up what I'm trying to learn about you, okay? All right, so enhancing your application. The spectrum of kind of admissions to US universities, there are over 4,000 universities in the United States, 2-year and 4-year institutions. They cover everything you could possibly think of, and their admissions policies and practices are equally diverse. So that is challenging for you all to navigate. But as you think of the kind of spectrum of selectivity and institutions that are getting far more applications than space in their classes, it means that we're looking at more and more things to kind of make those decisions. There are also institutions that, as part of their mission and founding kind of structure, they are open door institutions, and they have a place for you if that is a place that you want to be. So there's this whole range. I'm going to be speaking a little bit more from the side of more selective institutions, but just keep in mind that all of this, you're going to go back to the individual universities and kind of think about how that works there. In general, academics, first and foremost, we are an academic institution. We want to see that students are prepared to do well at our institution. We have a lot of resources and supports, but there are also things that maybe we don't have, where we say, we want you to not just survive on our campus, we want you to thrive. And we want you to come in with a certain level of kind of academic preparation or certain kinds of courses. For a more selective institution, if you have rigorous course options available to you in high school, we expect you to have taken advantage of that. It doesn't really matter. I had someone ask about, like, do I need to take courses in the thing that I think I'm going to major in? No, not necessarily. High school is a time for broad education. If you think you want to do engineering in college and you have an opportunity to do AP English in high school, fantastic. We think that that's going to make you a better engineer, having those really great writing, communication, literary analysis skills that you're going to get from that AP English course. Sometimes students will ask, like, is it better to get an A in that course that's easier or a B in that course that's harder? I want to see that you're challenging yourself, okay? Getting straight A's is not going to be kind of a guaranteed admission into selective institutions. And if you have not opted for those more rigorous courses, that is going to be something that we're going to kind of take note of and see on your transcript. Rigor is always in the context of your school. If your school does not offer AP courses, we do not expect to see AP courses. Maybe that's dual enrollment, maybe that's online courses, maybe there are other opportunities for you. Maybe there are not a lot of opportunities, and that's something that your school tells us in the school profile that they submit with your application. And so again, we're looking at you in the context of the school and the opportunities that you've had and how you've made those decisions. So then in those courses that you've chosen, how have you done? We do not expect perfection, but we do, the more selective the university is, the more people that are vying for those spots, we want to see that you've been able to do very well across the curriculum in a variety of courses that you've taken. Essays, if you are not like in grade 12 now, put this to the back of your mind, or yeah, I'd say like fall of grade 12 is when you want to kind of start thinking about this. Don't start focusing too much on essays too far in advance. When you're earlier, dive into high school. Figure out who you are as a student. Figure out what you enjoy doing, because that's going to be the substance that you're going to potentially be writing about in those essays. Don't start kind of doing that too far in advance, but that's where your voice comes through. We see your transcript, we see what classes you've done, how you've done in them. That doesn't actually tell me a whole lot about who you are when I sit down next to you to have lunch. So the essay is where your voice comes through. There are other places where other people's voices come through. So your school counselor, teachers. At Dartmouth, we do have an additional recommendation that's a peer recommendation. So a friend, a classmate, a teammate who's speaking about their experience with you. And that's where other people are kind of helping to paint that picture of who you are beyond the numbers and the data that is coming through on the transcript. Connect and visit. Some schools will say very explicitly that we take into account demonstrated interest. That means if you have never visited the campus, done an online program, sent an email, opened an email, they're going to see that and they're going to be like, well, the student is coming to us out of nowhere. They don't actually have any interest in being here. We're not very interested in them. Dartmouth does not track demonstrated interest, so we don't have kind of points for that in any way. However, if you're thinking that you're going to apply to Dartmouth, we're just a short drive down the highway. Please come visit us. I work with students across the state of Vermont. I grew up kind of in the shadow of Dartmouth. I knew a whole lot about Dartmouth. My mom worked there. I knew nothing about the undergraduate program at Dartmouth. We are more than a hospital. We have a great hospital, but we are more than a hospital. Please come do a campus tour, meet our current students, sit in on an info session, and do that for as many schools that you're interested in as you can. And if there are schools that are on the other side of the country, other places that you can't get to, see if they have online programs. Because more selective universities will have a place often in their application where they ask you, why are you interested in this university? And you got to have something to share. And so it's not about getting points for engagement. It's about learning more deeply about that university and figuring out, why do I want to be at this campus? What are my goals? How are they going to help me meet those goals? Okay. Sometimes you'll have something like a portfolio or audition that might be required if you're applying to like a conservatory style arts program. Other times it might be optional. Other times they might say, please don't send us that. No, thank you. We don't have space in our program, in our review for that. All right, so this idea of like capable versus competitive, for a more selective institution, we have this pool of applicants who are applying. They are, for the most part, very smart. They have done awesome things in high school. They're also really interesting. They're also very kind. They're great people. They have teachers and counselors who say very nice things about them, who are very impressed by them. And that is the baseline, okay? So it's important that, yes, you're showing us that you have that baseline, but that alone is not going to be kind of what decides admission at a more selective university that has far more people applying than spaces in the class. And again, some universities are not super selective or are, you know, at a place where they say, we want to see that, and that's it, and that's great. And that makes you a great fit for our institution. So there's this whole spectrum of kind of what goes into the things that universities are looking for in their applicants. A holistic review means, unfortunately, I cannot just kind of plug this info into like a computer and get an outcome.
So holistic review is basically, we review everything, your academic, your letter of recommendations, your involvement outside your academic, sports, music, arts, anything. So we review everything. We do have a baseline of, typically schools have a baseline of their admissions standard, but they also look at everything. Unlike maybe some schools, if you, maybe not Dartmouth, I'm just thinking of like maybe some more competitive schools. If you have a certain SAT scores that are not at their minimum, they might not even look at everything else that you have submitted. But that's not true for schools that are reviewing things holistically. So that's more like Vermont State University review process.
And those can be frustrating sometimes because you're like, just what do you need? Like, what do I need to do to get in? And we're like, well, you know, like grades are important, but your voice is important and essays are important and recommendations are important. And we're not trying to be difficult, but it really is all of this that comes together in our review. And we put a lot of time into doing that review and thinking about who you are in our applicant pool. Academic trend. So sometimes we see students who maybe had a little bit of a rough start to high school, but then are doing really well by the end. That's absolutely something that we're kind of putting more weight on the end of high school, and having, a grade that you're not proud of in grade 9 does not mean that it's the end of the world by any means. And then your story. Who are you? Who will you be on our campus? What are you adding to our community? One of the things that's really great about college is that you are in this point where you are often moving from kind of a more familiar setting into a setting where you're meeting people who for the first time might be pretty different from you, might come from a different background, might come from a different place, might have different ideas, and you are that person for them as well. So who are you going into that community, and how do we get to know you through the application? Yeah.
So with the academic trend, I would add, sometimes you have maybe medical situations or family situation that makes your one semester grades not doing, didn't look good. So that is, it's important in your story or your essay or substitute of explanation, to kind of explain that so that we don't assume that you're just slacking during that year or semester. Because I know there are some situations where students might be an athlete and they have injuries. They're not able to do all their work because they're in the hospital. So those are the kind of things that are important for us to understand. So
Yeah, try not to leave us with a bunch of big questions. All right. So we've now submitted our applications, big sigh of relief, and then we get responses back from universities. For a place like Dartmouth, it's admit to the college as a whole. If there's a larger or sometimes kind of more complex institution, maybe has multiple campuses, different undergraduate schools, different programs, there might have been a point in the application where you say, here's my first choice campus or first choice program, here's my second choice, and there might be an admit, but to a different part of the institution than what was your first choice. Waitlist means we're not done with you, but we have sent out other admit offers and we're going to wait and see where the class lands and if there is space, because this is a gamble for us on the admissions side. We have a certain number of beds, a certain number of spaces on campus, and we are over admitting, knowing that some students are going to say no. And sometimes more students say no, and sometimes fewer students say no. So there might then be space in the class. And as soon as we know if there is space in the class, then we might go back to the wait list. A lot of times the wait list is not like in order. You're not like number 2 on the wait list or something. It might be, okay, this program under enrolled. So we're going to go back and see if there are more students in that program or this geography. We didn't have any students from Vermont who said yes. And so we're going to go back and see if we can have more students from Vermont, different things like that that might go into an institution's decision of who comes off the wait list. If you get a waitlist offer, read it carefully and see what they are asking for and what they are not asking for. Typically, they are not asking for you to show up on the campus the next day to plead your case in person. They might be saying, towards the end of April, we're not going to go back and look at our waitlist until the beginning of May. Please let us know if you want to still be considered. Because maybe you got admitted somewhere else and you're like, bye, I'm done with you. I don't need to stay on your waitlist, and that's totally fine. So give them the information that they're asking for. Don't give them more information than that. Defer, this is like if you applied early decision or early action and they say, we're not able to offer you admission now, we want to keep considering you in the context of our regular decision pool, then they might say that they're deferring your application and we'll come back to it and review it in regular decision. And then there are some universities that say, we will admit you if you kind of bring up this grade, or if you, as a non-native English speaker, get this score on an English exam or something like that. So there might be something that's a conditional offer of admission. Technically, I would say every one of our offers is a conditional offer of admission, because if you are getting all A's and you submit your application fall of your senior year in high school and you get into Dartmouth and you are celebrating and you're having a great time and it's senior spring in high school and you're like, I'm done with class, I'm into college. And then we get your final transcript and you've got like C's and D's. You better believe you're going to hear from us at that point. So we expect you to stay on the same trajectory of what we saw in your application. Yeah. May 1st is typically the response date. So over the course of April, if this is a school that gives you a decision at the beginning of April, there's then this flurry of like admitted student programs and visit days and sitting down with advisors to go through financial aid packages and figuring out all the different kind of options that you have in front of you. That might be a time that you're getting back in touch with VSAC to think about financial aid. That might be a time that you're reaching out to the admissions offices and saying, I didn't understand this part of my offer. I didn't understand this part of my financial aid offer. Universities owe you a clear response about how much it's going to cost you, how much money you're getting from them. You should be totally, it's within your rights to like ask those questions and reach out to the financial aid or admissions offices about that. And then typically May 1st is when you're going to make that final decision, get back to universities. I think that's it. And so now we've got a bit of time for Q&A, about 20 minutes even. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully some questions. Yeah, and we've got a mic coming because some folks are online.
When can you start your Common App and organizing your lists and that kind of stuff?
So it's never like too early. The Common App resets every year on August 1st. And if you have done some work in the Common App before, it will roll over a lot of that. So if you want to start building out, like these are, 15 universities that I'm starting to think about, I'm going to add them in there. And they do have some kind of search or like research tools within the Common App. So that's not a bad idea if you have some schools in mind. College Board has a website called Big Future that's also a great tool for research. You can say, okay, I want this kind of program. I want it within 100 miles of this geography. I want a big city. I want this cost level, and it'll kind of spit out a list of schools that match that criteria. So it's not a bad idea to like start some of this early. It also can be kind of fun if you find a school that you're like, that school's really cool, and they say this is what they want to see from students, then you've got time to kind of be thinking about, I want to be at that kind of school, so I'm going to be working on, building up that kind of profile that that's the kind of student that I want to be. Fall of senior year is when you're actually kind of sitting down, working on your applications, meeting with your high school counselor, requesting recommendation letters, and like pulling that together. If you have an opportunity summer before senior year or earlier to do college visits, that's great. I know that I had like 2 cousins' weddings on the East Coast the summer before my senior year, and so one was in North Carolina and one was in Philadelphia, and so my dad and I did a road trip down the East Coast and visited so many colleges. It was way too many, but it was great because there were some where I was like, I don't know what it is, I just don't like it, and like crossed that one off and added some that I wouldn't have kind of thought of otherwise. Yeah, so those are some things to have in mind.
And I think with selecting what college to apply to, because there are so many of them, it's kind of really important to really know what, kind of like what Anna is saying, what's your priority? Does it have to be a big school? Does it have to be in a city? Or what kind of person are you? Are you kind of one that would succeed in a large group or smaller group of, community? So I would recommend, it's really easy with the Common App. When I was applying for college, we have paper applications, so it's really hard to apply to a lot of schools. But now it's really easy. You can apply to literally 50 schools, but 50 times, like let's say $50 or $80 of application fee, that's a lot of money. So that's something that, no, for example, I'm just, so I would recommend like 5 to 10 schools is kind of what I would recommend students apply to. I'm just saying like the Common App make it so easy for people to apply to too many schools, so.
Question over here. Yeah.
You mentioned resumes. What are like colleges looking for in a resume, like just in general?
Yeah, so when we are thinking about a resume, we actually don't necessarily want anything beyond the structure of the Common Application itself. So we only use the Common Application as our application platform. And within that, there's an area where you can talk about activities, and you can list up to 10 activities. And activities, take that broadly. It can be something that's a club in school. It can be the fact that you are the primary caregiver for your younger sibling for 2 hours after school every day before your parents come home. It can be a job that you've had. It can be a summer academic program at the Governor's Institute that you did. But you are going to think through all the things that you spend time doing and things that you care about and that you're interested in, and think about how you're going to curate that into a list of up to 10 things. And it asks like, how much time goes into those. There are some universities that will say if you have an additional resume, you are welcome to upload that. I think we like allow people to upload it, but I would say that for us, I would prefer that you like fit that into the application itself. Yeah, and that can be in another university that doesn't use that platform might kind of use a resume in the in place of that. Yeah.
Some university also want students to apply to the general admissions, but some might want students to apply to specific, I think you mentioned it earlier, a specific school or specific, like an engineering school or a art school and such. So.
Yeah, and that's actually a helpful thing to zone in on. So if you were applying to, and I know that like UVM structure, is anyone from UVM in the room? No. Okay, I'm gonna speak of UVM, knowing that I do not work at UVM, and you should fact check everything I say. But UVM has some undergraduate colleges that are very specialized, and so I would maybe, if I were applying to UVM, I would go onto the website for that and see like if I'm applying to the nursing program or the School of Environment, are there certain things that they're really hoping to see where it's like, you're not just studying biology, you're in that like more specialized kind of program. I used to work at an institution that had an undergraduate business college, and that was not for people with a casual interest in economics. That was for people who have really kind of engaged in that area and have shown that, and that might be something that then you'd want to highlight either in a resume or in the activities list of your application. Yeah.
Suppose you have a student who's chosen to do early college at the community college and wants to transfer as a junior to a four-year college. Is that fundamentally the same kind of process?
Ooh. Do you work with transfer applicants?
So I did work with transfer some. The transfer admissions is slightly different. I would say it's almost a little bit easier to, depending on the program, to get in as a transfer student than as a first-year student. So the credits that you earn needs to be from regionally accredited institutions. So there are so many accreditation out there, national accreditation, online school accreditation. So make sure it's a regionally accredited institution. So so we would kind of look at it. Students with the registrar's office and the transfer admissions office will review what classes and GPA. We put a lot more weight into the college GPA and classes over your high school if you've gone out of high school. So for some students who like do not know what they want to study in their high school, maybe community college for 1 year or 2 years is better options. Then that is definitely a good way for you to go.
So there's also something called advanced standing credit, where you might not be considered as a transfer applicant, but you are admitted, and whether this is coming from APs or dual enrollment courses, universities will say if you got a 4 or a 5 on AP English, you get 1 credit, or 1 class worth of credit. If you got a 5 on AP Bio, you get 1 credit. So that's something that you may want to look up, kind of what does that university count as like advanced standing credit, even if you're applying as a first-year student. Some universities will be very generous on that. Some will be very stingy on that. I will say Dartmouth is more on the stingy side because of our financial aid policy, because we meet full financial need. And so there shouldn't be like a financial reason for someone needing to kind of speed through college more quickly. Transfer is like, again, sort of, it really depends on the place that you are going to. They will have wildly different policies about that. And it can also depend on the department that you are transferring into, and what they will count or not count. So sometimes we may have transfer students technically, but they actually come in with almost no credits, because the work that they have done does not sort of correspond with what we would count as transfers. So that's going to be a process of reaching out to some individual institutions to see what they would say.
If teens are spending their senior year of high school as doing the early college program, and so they technically haven't graduated high school, but all of those credits go back to the high school, and then they graduate, and then they're applying to college. Is that a transfer student, or is that a like first time, because the early college program is kind of different?
We would consider you a first-year applicant
Okay.
at Dartmouth. Yeah, worth asking maybe at some other places, but again, that would be something where we would consider you a first-year applicant. There might be a situation where you would get either some advanced standing credit, or we would certainly evaluate if there's a college level course that you've done that bumps you up. We're not going to say start in Math 1 when you can show us, oh, I've actually already done Math 1 and 2. You're going to bump up to Math 3. Yeah.
So in addition to, early college, some schools, maybe an AP class might be a dual enrollment class. I know my son has an AP class that's a dual enrollment class with St. Mike's, for example. To have that credit count towards transfer credits, please request the official copy of transcript from all of the colleges you went to, even as a high school applicant.
So I'm planning on taking a gap year. How does that change my admissions process?
Yeah, so gap years you have two pathways. You can apply to college before you take your gap year. And if you get in and you say, yes, I've gotten into college XYZ and I want to go there, but I'm going to defer my enrollment, that's something that is often allowed, but it's worth looking at a college's kind of policy for that. So you can apply when you're still in high school, and then the advantage of that is that you've got your high school counselor right there, you've got your teachers right there, all of that is kind of fresh in their minds. They're there to help guide you through that process. You also could finish high school, go on your gap year, and while you're on your gap year, then apply to college. Gap years can be kind of transformative sometimes. And so there might be a situation where you say, I actually want to apply to college with my final high school transcript available. Maybe grade 11 was not your best work, but grade 12 was actually like really awesome. Maybe that's a reason to sort of delay and apply with your final grade 12 transcript available. And maybe you're like, I don't know where I want to go to college. That's why I'm taking a gap year, because I want to kind of explore life and everything. And maybe then you have a more clear sense of what you even want out of college. And maybe it makes more sense to do that then. So up to you, but either path, we have students who come from either of those paths.
If you didn't have a very good high school experience and taking a gap year, I highly recommend taking a course or two at a college level to kind of, if you do decide to apply after a year out of college, then we can see beyond high school. Oh, okay, he or she or they, them can have the potential to be successful in college. So yes, we'll give them an opportunity. So.
Any other questions? You guys are all set now. You know everything you need to apply to college. Yeah. One thing that I would kind of put on your radar as homework, if you're not sure sort of where to start and you don't know what kind of college you want to go to, there's some great options around. Come visit, see if there are open houses or open days at our campuses, campus tours. There are a lot of different styles of universities within driving distance of you here. And even if you're like, I'm going to go to the West Coast and get as far away from Vermont as possible, still use that as like a research tool. Go and visit some different types of campuses, meet the students, ask them about their experience. What's your weekend like? What do you do in the evenings for fun? How's the food in the dining hall? See what it's like being on a smaller campus, being in a campus where maybe more students are living off campus, all sorts of different things, because that can help you to kind of think about what you actually want.
Even if you go to a school that's near your home, there are always travel opportunity within the universities. So I know with Vermont State University, we have study abroad, we have student exchange programs. So you're not limited to your little areas. I just wanted to put a plug on that because that's true for any schools, I think. So you don't have to go to school to the West Coast. You can have that experience. We have students who went to Hawaii for a whole year of college. So, and they pay in-state tuition. So that's kind of an option. So. Yep. The final slide, the last one. Oh, before this?
Oh, is that?
Oh.
Yeah, and oftentimes, so in terms of like reaching out, one thing I will say is if you can find it on our website, fantastic. Don't send us an email with a question that you can find on your own. If you have a question and you've looked on our website and you cannot find it, by all means reach out. Sometimes if there's like a general email, so we have a email that you'll be directed to on our website that's just like reply@dartmouth.edu, that will get you the quickest response. If that email comes in and is like, oh, this is really actually kind of a Vermont specific question, they'll look up, okay, who on our team works with Vermont? That's Anna, and then they'll bump that over to me. Or a university might say, if you're interested in this program, please reach out to this member of our staff. Another great resource is current students. So a lot of universities will have contact info or ways that you can reach out to current students. Do not write to me saying, what's fun to do on the weekends at Dartmouth? Because I do not stay at Dartmouth on the weekends. I go back home. So that's a great question to send to a current student. Think about the different kind of ways that you can reach out on the website. Okay. Thanks, everybody.